I'd been working in contract security to pay my way through university, so I'd worked in all kinds of different places. The strangest thing that happened to me was when I was working 5 night shifts in a row at a local newspaper about a year after I had graduated. It was in a small city in the south of England, and the paper had been running for over 150 years, always in that same building. The job was to patrol every hour, and it was in a pretty decent area of the town, so they didn't really expect any problems. The building was much older than the paper, and had been extended quite a few times over the years, so it was built in a very odd way inside. There would be a step up running across the room of a floor. Corridors were all different widths, and it seemed like none of the floors were quite flat. My shift would start at 6 p.m. and run through until 6 a.m. It was only a local newspaper, so it didn't have staff in there all night like a bigger newsroom. Usually by 8 p.m. it would just be me with a coffee machine and a good book for company, and I had plenty of time to explore. The building had 3 levels above ground, but there was a basement area too, which I swear was bigger than the size of the building above. Like I said, I'd worked in security for a few years by that point, and because I didn't have a family, I got sent on the all-night jobs, which were usually newish offices, warehouses, and the occasional manufacturing place. So this newspaper building was really out of the ordinary. It had a lot of Apple Macs on the desk, but this was the 90s and things hadn't shifted completely over to computers, and there were always new stacks of paper, photographs, and files around. There was some new furniture, but also really old desks, coat hooks, and other stuff that looked like it had been there since the newspaper started. Walking around up there would feel a little strange. I was used to modern offices, and so this was really different for me. The floors would creak when no one was there, and the pipes would rattle for no good reason. I'd have to watch how I walked on the floor or I'd trip up, and moving my torch around suddenly would make the shadows seem alive on the walls. Down in the basement was different. It was part of the building, and there was a locked door from there to the street, so it was part of my job to patrol. But there was a different atmosphere down there. There was a wooden set of steps leading down to the basement, and it was stuffed with rows of old filing cabinets, filled with the archive of the newspaper, piles of antique typewriters and leather office chairs that looked 100 years old. The first 2 nights I was on duty, I felt a bit nervous when I was down there. It took a while to get the layout of the space. It had a low ceiling, and there was only one path around which looped back to the stairs, with the walls of the path made up of all the filing cabinets that had been crammed down there over the years. I couldn't see more than 6 feet before I had to turn a corner, but even so it felt like there was someone watching me. It started getting really weird on the 3rd night. On one of my patrols, I suddenly got that feeling of being watched, much stronger than before. As I walked through the maze of cabinets, I swore I could hear someone else's footsteps. They weren't distinct, as they would be if the person was walking around by themselves. It was more like they were trying to take steps at the same time as me, so the sound of their footsteps was coming just a tiny bit before or after my own. I didn't know what to think of that, so I sped up to see if I could catch them out, and found myself back at the stairs up to the rest of the building. When I took a few steps up the stairs out of the basement, I swear I heard someone breathing right behind me, a rasping breath. I nearly tripped because I turned so fast, but there was still no one there. On the 4th night, the rest of the building was quiet as usual, but I was already nervous about going down into the basement again, and skipped it on the first couple of patrols. In the end, I told myself that I was being stupid, and went down there around midnight. It was cold like always, and I felt like I was being stared at the whole time. I was sure that when I turned around a corner I was going to see someone there. As I got about halfway around the looping maze through the filing cabinets, I clearly heard running footsteps from over where the staircase was. There was a man's cry of pain, a sound like someone stumbling, and that same rasping breath I'd heard the night before, but much louder this time. I was sure someone was hurt, but I didn't know who or how. I ran around the rest of the maze and only slowed on the last corner. I shouted, "I'm coming around, stay where you are," and put my head around the corner. There was no one there, but I clearly saw a big metal meat cleaver like a butcher uses, embedded deep into the third step up. I ducked back around the last filing cabinet and looked for a weapon. We're not police, and British security guards don't carry weapons, but I really wanted something. Short of throwing a whole old typewriter at someone, there wasn't anything nearby, so I peeked around the corner again, and the cleaver was gone. I'm not sure what freaked me out more, seeing the cleaver there the first time, or wondering who had taken it away in a few seconds while I wasn't looking. Checking all the shadows and listening carefully for footsteps or breathing, I crept up to the staircase. There was a deep gouge in the step where I'd seen the cleaver. The weirdest bit was that it was dirty, like it had been cut there for years, but I didn't stop to think about it. I went up the stairs, keeping my back to the wall, and locked the door at the top. I called the police from the nearest phone. Remember, this was in the 90s, so we didn't have mobiles with us all the time, and the police turned up quickly. They searched the building and didn't find anyone, any sign of a break-in, and definitely not a meat cleaver. I think they thought I'd fallen asleep on duty, but I know what I saw. The fifth night was my last shift of the contract, and I needed the money, so I did the shift. But I didn't go into the basement at all, and I stopped the security work soon after. I don't know what I saw and heard down there that night, but I'm sure someone ended badly in that place. I'm just glad I didn't join them. I was working on night security at an industrial estate on the outskirts of a big, posh university town. We were far enough away from where most people lived that we wouldn't usually get anyone passing through unless they were a driver with a late delivery. You didn't get any drunks coming in, and groups of kids would hardly ever bother coming our way. Occasionally a street person would find a place to hole up there for the night, but they weren't usually trouble and moved on okay. Actual criminals were the main things to worry about. People wanting to steal tools or metal to resell. All in all, it was quiet most nights of the year, especially during the summer months when it got dark later. There were a couple of small booths for us by the entrances, and a porter cabin that was hooked up to the CCTV. The job was to do a few circuits around the place every night, check doors and windows, and make sure that the old CCTV system always had enough tapes to keep recording. Nothing was high-tech, and I had a regulation walkie-talkie that I had to carry at all times. But there was only one guard at night, so I couldn't call anyone on there, and it was just another thing to carry. All pretty standard stuff. I'd had to scare off a couple of proper criminals a couple of times, which had been tense, but they'd scarpered fast enough and didn't want trouble. Though, I'd heard stories from other estates about gangs getting more organized, and it getting nastier. We weren't supposed to, but most of the guys kept a few bits of weighty pipe or wood stashed around the estate, just in case they needed to lay their hands on something to defend themselves with. I didn't do that myself, but I'd noticed a few of them around, of course. So this one night I'm on my rounds, and I find a couple of the windows on one of the main buildings had been smashed. They had reinforced glass, so it was just smacked in with no entry into the building. Just one window I could have missed on an earlier round, but two like that would have been hard to miss. It must have happened since the last patrol, a couple of hours earlier, so whoever did it could still be around the area. I began to check more carefully, and as I went on with my round I saw more damage. Windows smashed, doors kicked, and a stack of pallets overturned. I began to get pretty nervous, and started heading back to the porter cabin to call the police. I could look for more damage with company when the police arrived. I got really nervous as I went back because I saw a delivery van's tires had been slashed. It wasn't just the air let out, but the tires had been properly stabbed, so whoever did it was carrying a blade. Rather than hurrying, I began to be a lot more careful on my way back to the cabin. I got back there without seeing anyone, so locked the door and called the police. They said they'd send a car over to investigate. Just after I'd finished the call, I saw the people on one of the CCTV monitors. There were 2 of them. They weren't dressed like guys out to trash a place for laughs, and they weren't acting like they were out of control. They completely creeped me out. They were 2 young, clean-shaven white guys, walking calmly along the road side by side, wearing tuxedos and gloves. They didn't have masks on, nothing to hide their faces, and their hair, one brown and the other tinted dark blonde, made them look more like they were on their way to a ball than on a crime spree. They were carrying hammers, 1 each, and didn't look like they were talking at all. They stopped. One walked over to a window and began to savagely smash at it with the hammer, buckling the wire in the glass, all the while the other one was watching calmly. After the fury of smashing, they walked along together as if nothing had happened. As they got nearer the camera, I could see they had these huge, eerie smiles on their faces. They disappeared from the CCTV angles, and I tried to find them. I knew from the camera that they were coming my way. I rechecked that the door to the cabin was locked, and then I heard a click as the power went out. They were outside and had pulled the plug. I backed away from the door, fumbling with only a little light coming in through a shuttered window, and then the door handle started rattling. They were trying to get in. I didn't hear them speak at all, but one of them started laughing as he kicked at the door. The whole cabin shook, and then the window splintered as a hammer smashed into it. It sounded like one had climbed onto the roof. I could hear the footsteps, and then the sloshing of liquid. I smelt fuel, and I realized they were going to burn the porter cabin down, with me and the CCTV footage inside. The thought that they still had those smiles on their faces sent a chill down my back. I knew I had to open the door and run and hope that I could outpace them. They looked fit, judging by their builds, but I'd rather try to run and fight if I had to, than stay there and be burnt alive. I was gearing up for unlocking the door and sprinting when I heard their footsteps moving away. No crackling of flames or anything, just them moving off. A moment later I could see the blue flashing lights of a police car pulling up. I've never been so scared in my life. The police called in a squad immediately, but they say they didn't find anyone. I gave them the tapes from the CCTV, but everyone who matched the footage from the cheap black and white cameras could give an alibi. I don't know, maybe they didn't find them. But money goes far, and if some rich kids wanted to get their kicks, I wonder how much they could get away with. I was given a month off, and the porter cabin was replaced with a brick building while I was away. I later found out that it was paid for by an anonymous donation. I kept the job, only until I could find something with more day shifts and more people around. But the men in tuxedos never came back while I was there. Sometimes I wonder where they are, and what they do to get their kicks these days. I was working an overnight at the care home when this happened. Usually I did the home care, going to people's houses to wash them, make sure they're taking their pills, that kind of thing. But sometimes the agency would give me overnights at a few residential care homes too. They're usually easy shifts, and though the money's terrible, whatever bit of the care industry you're in, compared to some of the jobs, they're not too bad. Lots of checks, a whole ton of cleaning, and a lot of time you're by yourself. Care homes at night, though, they can be quite scary places. There are lots of glass panels in the doors, so you'll see a reflection moving out of the corner of your eye sometimes, and you're never quite sure what caused it. When I wasn't doing other things, the station where I had to sit for most of the night was at the junction of 3 corridors to residents' bedrooms. The corridors have those movement sensor lights in them, so they're dark unless someone is walking around. I mean, you know those things can be twitchy, but when it's dead quiet and 4 a.m, it's hard not to feel a little jumpy when a corridor's lights go on by themselves, one by one. None of this is helped by the residents. They're mostly lovely, but sometimes they'll wander in the night. You'll turn a corner and one might be standing there. Sometimes they've been still long enough that the lights have turned off, and so they're there in the darkness. We all could end up there, and they mean no harm, but it makes you jump sometimes. If you're easily unnerved by figures in white gowns wandering through halls in the night, then night shifts in residential homes aren't for you. You get used to all this, mostly. And the worst that happens is the typical stuff that goes on with age and illness. We try our best, and generally avoid letting our imaginations get carried away. All that said, I still get a bit uneasy when I think about what happened one night in the winter 2 years ago. We've got patients that we know are likely to wander in the night, but I'll call her Dora. Dora wasn't one of them. She had dementia but wasn't too far along. That night, though, somehow Dora got out. Like actually out of the building as far as I can tell. I don't know where she went or how she got past me, but that's sometimes how it goes with dementia. The body can be basically fine, and there is still a brain working hard. It's just firing in odd ways. Dora came walking back along the corridor towards the nurses' station where I was sitting, heading in from the direction of the building's main entrance. I said hello, but she ignored me. Instead of looking at me, Dora was fixated on a space in the air in front of her, as if she could see someone else walking ahead of her. She stopped in front of the station and watched as the space walked down the corridor. What freaked me out was that one of the motion sensors went on at that exact moment, halfway down the corridor, just where Dora was looking. Dora said, in this really quiet voice, "There she is again." Then looked at me for the first time and calmly said, "She'll come to me next. Time for bed." Like I say, you get used to this kind of thing, but this was creepy even by the standards of care work. I helped Dora back to her bedroom and made sure she was comfortable. She seemed a bit quiet, but otherwise with it for the rest of that time. When it turned out that a resident had passed away that night, in the room by the light that had gone on, that was strange. And then Dora passed away the next night in her sleep. I don't know, maybe Dora saw something just before the end. As weird as I find all this, it's not so bad. Dora wasn't afraid, so maybe whatever comes for us at the end isn't something that we should fear. There could be things around us that we can't see, but perhaps not all of them mean us harm. Thank you for listening. These stories were read by Jay Britton and written by Mata Haggis from Matazone and Copperstone Sea. Like, comment, or subscribe for more chilling stories in the future. Stay safe out there.